Hello, agentpreneurs of ListReports, and welcome to episode 40 of the Daily List Reports. Hard to believe that we're 8 weeks into this show, and what a way to celebrate the end of an amazing week. We've had tremendous guests. I want to bring my co-host Wissal on here. So, Wissal, why don't you say hello to our agentpreneurs for today?
Hello, everyone. We have a wonderful, wonderful show for you today. Very excited about this after a full week of incredible guests. We are so excited about this one.
Yes, absolutely. So stand and salute Extreme Ownership. Today is the day that we get to bring you the people actually behind Extreme Ownership. So, Wissal, what are we doing today?
Well, you've all heard me talk about this incredible book I've been obsessed with, bringing it on and off the air over the last few weeks, Extreme Ownership. We've been talking about leadership philosophy, how some of the lessons in this book are so applicable to helping everyone get through this time and think differently about their day. We've heard from incredible leaders speak about their own perspective and personal opinions of extreme ownership, especially this week. And today, we're bringing to all of you, our incredible agentpreneurs live, the source and co-author of Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink. Before we begin, we'll be speaking actually with Andrew Paul, who I'm so delighted to introduce you today first. And we're going to bring him on in a second. I want to make a quick introduction about Andrew before we bring him on today. Andrew Paul, who is our first speaker today, joining Jocko Willink, is a former Navy SEAL officer and reservist with over 17 years of total service. And now he's a leadership instructor and the chief of staff at a company called Echelon Front, who he'll be speaking with you about today. Andrew was commissioned in 2001, graduated from SEAL training with Echelon Front co-founder Leif Babin. He then made several combat deployments to Iraq, both as an OIC of a Naval Special Warfare Special Boat Team Detachment and as the assistant platoon commander for Delta Platoon, a part of Task Unit Bruiser that Jocko Willink led. Andrew's experienced a lot of lessons from the Battle of Ramadi firsthand under the leadership and mentorship of both Leif and Jocko. And we were very fortunate that after his time of service, Andrew decided to take all of those incredible skills he acquired and choose the mortgage industry to build his career. At the time that he did that, I was very fortunate to be in the veteran advocacy space and became a good friend of Andrew's. And over the years, I've just talked to this guy, worked with this guy, watched him become incredibly successful because of his mentality. And, I was talking to all of you a week or two ago about this book, and I thought, I want to share with you any practical tips I can bring to this audience that will help them understand how to face their day during this crisis. And Andrew is one of the first guys I thought of because I see him on Facebook and Instagram all day, just like Jocko, waking up, putting the feet on the ground and executing fearlessly in a different way than us as civilians do, right? And as we've talked about, we want to bridge the gap between how these people, these leaders who have this incredible experience go about their day successfully so we can share those tips and tricks with all of you. Andrew's going to come on for a moment to talk to you about his experience with Echelon Front, and then we're going to be bringing Jocko on. Before we do that, Andrew, before I bring you on here, I want to say, as I was reading your bio in preparation for today, I almost was brought to tears because I feel so bad that there's a fact about you I didn't thoroughly understand. I looked on Andrew's bio before bringing him on today and realized he is the recipient of a Bronze Star Medal with B, and an Army Commendation Medal with B, and various other combat meritorious medals. I had to Google what that was as a civilian. And I know a lot of people in the military. I still didn't understand what that meant. I Googled and I want to share with you today, and Jocko holds significant medals similar to this. The Bronze Star Medal with the V device to denote heroism is the 4th highest military decoration for valor. That hit me really hard because, Andrew, I've known you for years and I didn't know this about you. In observation of Memorial Day coming up here Monday, it is with distinct pleasure that I get to bring on this incredible person, leader, an influencer in our industry. Andrew Paul, welcome to the show.
Andrew, welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on board, and thanks for that introduction, Wissal. With regards to those medals and things, probably the reason you don't know about it is because it's not like I'm going to meet you and go, hey, Wissal, guess what? Guess what medal I have? And you know why? Because the real focus of my experience in the military was just meeting a call and having the honor to serve with incredible men and being able to serve in the SEAL teams. It's humbling when I look back at that time and look at the men who I had the honor to serve alongside, men who hold far more medals and committed incredible acts of valor that we can all be proud of, and some of which I'll talk about today, which makes Memorial Day such a special holiday for me and all of us at Echelon Front. But
It
anyway,
still shocks
thanks for
me,
having me.
Drew. It still shocks me that of all the careers you could have chosen, that we were lucky enough to score you as a leading advocate serving military clientele in the mortgage industry, which so desperately needed education about how to serve this very special class of people. How did we get so lucky, Andrew? Why did you choose this industry to become an expert in?
Well, I don't know so much if I chose it or if it chose me. Another, if I knew now what I knew then, would I still do it? I don't know. I went into it with one kind of idea of what it was going to be. Got absolutely crushed. My transition from active duty into the civilian sector and into the mortgage business was not something necessarily to be proud of, but I certainly look back on it as a lesson that I and others certainly can learn from. I was very ill prepared. I found myself in a new industry in changing times, and basically got into the mortgage business in 2007. Not exactly the best time to get into mortgage and real estate if you remember what was happening back then. And so it was a tough time. I was changing times. I had to adapt quickly, and I had to push through uncertainty and setbacks and challenges, and do so while I was struggling emotionally with leaving my brothers behind from my time in service, having just come back from a deployment where we lost dear friends who died very heroically in service to their country. And so it was a hard time for me. But the difference that I experienced in that very challenging transition was that while other people were kind of standing around and whining about the changes and like, well, when are we going to get back to stated income loans? And, why can't my home sell off the market in, a week and a half, or, 10% over asking and things like that? I didn't know any different. I was starting at the bottom. And while other people had built these expensive lifestyles and had these expectations of how it should be, I had no idea how it was supposed to be or how it should be. So all I did was sort of put my rucksack on and just start climbing up the mountain. And while everybody else was feeling sorry for themselves and frustrated with the situations, I just kind of had the blinders on and kept marching forward. And no matter after setback, I just kept going. I didn't have any kind of preconceived notion necessarily. So it was a tough transition, but nonetheless, I had the legacy of my teammates and friends to think about, and I just kind of kept telling myself that I had people relying on me, and I wanted to honor the sacrifices that my teammates had made with how I continued to live my life, and I think that's sort of the theme for me going into Memorial Day.
That commitment and passion is evident, as anyone who knows you, works with you, clients who've benefited from your service know. That is your reputation. And I'll tell you, I think I met you in 2008. I never knew you were struggling. It was never obvious. You were always that guy that we were always recruiting and could never get. That's the memory that I have of you, and the impression that you've left on this industry, and the people that you've served has been incredible, even after your time in the military. And I actually massive fan and very grateful for what you've done for veteran advocacy in this country in the real estate and mortgage lending space, because there's very few that take that commitment very seriously. You're one of them. Very, very happy to see you continuing that mission. But now I've learned when I called you up a couple weeks ago that you have a new mission that you are part of now, which I'm so grateful to see, with Echelon Front. Can you tell us a little bit about Echelon Front?
Absolutely. So, my last deployment before I left active duty was, as you mentioned in the intro, I was the assistant platoon commander in Delta Platoon, which was part of Task Unit Bruiser. And Task Unit Bruiser consists of two platoons, Charlie Platoon and Delta Platoon. We were heavily involved in the Battle of Ramadi and what ultimately became known as the Anbar Awakening and the turning of the tide in the war in Iraq. And Jocko Willink was our Task Unit commander. Leif Babin was the OIC of Charlie Platoon. And after that deployment, as I went into the mortgage business. Leif and Jocko continued on in their service, and then eventually founded Echelon Front and wrote the book Extreme Ownership, which many of you have now become familiar with. They began to build that company, taking the lessons that we had learned in the Battle of Ramadi and codifying those into a system, into these laws of combat that could be transitioned and taught to the next generation of leaders, in the Naval Special Warfare community. And then Leif and Jocko took those and, writing the book, began to find how we could apply those so that leaders across all industries, not just the military, but in the civilian sectors, all forms of, whether it's the finance, whether it's oil and gas, manufacturing, can use these same principles to lead their teams, lead their companies, and win on what their battlefield is. And that's what Echelon Front is all about. And about a year ago, as their company began to grow, Leif and Jocko reached out to me as they were growing and said, hey, we're looking to add another teammate here. you were in the Battle of Ramadi, you know us, you know the business world. What do you think about coming on board? And so about a year ago, I joined the team at Echelon Front as a leadership instructor. And it's been a great journey. I've learned a lot. And it's helped me really, I still have the mortgage company, right? My primary focus on this chief of staff at Echelon Front, helping run business operations. But what's really cool is that it's helped my role here at Echelon Front has forced me to live those laws of combat and those principles. And because if I can't live those myself and lead this other team over here and apply those principles, then what am I doing in this role? So it holds me to a certain level of accountability. It's helped me to become a better leader. And it's been really, it's been an honor for me to be able to come back and work with my brothers at Echelon Front. So
that's amazing, Andrew. Andrew, why don't you talk a little bit for our audience who may not be familiar with EF Online? I'm actually going to pull it up on the screen here, and I would love for everyone to understand what's available to them right now digitally.
Yeah, so Echelon Front, has our main mission is to teach people these leadership lessons so that they can lead their teams and win, and that has traditionally been through keynote speeches, working directly with companies, leadership within companies, et cetera, where we travel quite a bit to do that. As you can imagine, in these changing times, that has shifted a little bit, but our mission hasn't changed. It's still to teach people these laws of combat and help leaders lead. And so Echelon Front, which has been there, is going through a massive revamp right now, and we're seeing many more people join us there at Echelon Front. So for those of you who would like to get more experience with the laws of combat and how to become better leaders, Echelon Front is an online platform where people can engage with Echelon Front's leadership instructors and hear directly from Leif and Jocko in live Q&A sessions and get direct engagement. And I think it's particularly very useful for the real estate and mortgage industry, where many people in the real estate and mortgage industry don't necessarily have companies where they're getting leadership and these think tank opportunities. And it's a very decentralized, independent contractor type of organization. So I think there's a really unique I think it's really uniquely positioned to be a great fit for real estate and mortgage professionals. So, yeah, Echelon Front, we are very deeply involved with revamping that entire platform right now. So, check it out for more leadership opportunities and lessons there.
Yeah, we've got the links posted to it. I've checked it out. I actually just signed up. I think it's great. It's actually a tremendous value as well. So thank you guys for doing that and putting that service together. Andrew,
yeah.
we're gonna without further ado, we're gonna bring Jocko on, and then Andrew, we're gonna bring you back for some Q&A, and then to deliver some words to our audience at the end of the show. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds great. You guys are in for a treat. It's an honor for me to have been able to serve under Jocko, and now to be able to work with him at Echelon Front. He's been a leader or mentor to me for years, and more than that, has become a friend and someone that I can trust and turn to. And you guys, he's a special person for sure, and it's an honor that for me to be able to introduce you guys to Jocko and have him here. My friend, my brother, Jocko Willink.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for everything. So a man, again, who needs no introduction. Jocko Willink is the co-author of Extreme Ownership, a retired U.S. Navy SEAL with 20 years of service in SEALs teams. One of the things that I love, and I'll have to ask him the question, but Task Unit Bruiser became the most highly decorated special operations unit in the Iraq War, and I got to imagine there's a tremendous sense of pride for building a team that was able to perform at that level. So without further ado, Jocko, welcome to the show. Say hello to the agentpreneurs of ListReports.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Yes, absolutely. So, we're going to get right into it, Jocko. I've had the pleasure of obviously, reading the book and the content and asking every guest this week what extreme ownership means to them. And today I have the privilege of getting to ask, the man who created this sort of framework of thinking that same question. So, Jocko, I'm going to take a step back here, and why don't you talk to our audience about what extreme ownership really means?
Look, extreme ownership isn't some complex theory or philosophy. What extreme ownership is I'm going to take ownership of what's going on in my world. If there's problems, I'm going to take ownership of those problems and I'm going to get them fixed. That's pretty straightforward. It's actually amazing that this book has done so well with something that seems like it's such common sense. Unfortunately, as we know, common sense sometimes isn't too common. Now, what I've been hearing a lot lately is, okay, Jocko, I understand I'm supposed to take ownership of everything, but how am I supposed to take ownership of things that I have no control over? Well, first of all, I'll tell you this. in life, we actually usually have a lot more control over things than we give ourselves credit for. And an example that I like to talk about with that is the weather. Because everybody thinks, hey, you can't control the weather. I can't control the weather. You know, that's in God's hands. It's not in my hands. So let's think about this. If Andrew and I were going to go on a mission, and Andrew said, okay, Jocko, we're going to take helicopters to go do this mission. And I said, sounds good. You know, come up with a plan and we'll go do it. So he comes up with his plan. We're going to take helicopters to this target. And then we're getting ready to go. And guess what? Bad weather comes in. The helicopters can't fly. And Andrew comes to me and says, hey, Jocko, sorry. Helicopters can't fly. Weather's bad. You know, I can't control the weather. A lot of bosses would say, yeah, I get it. You can't control the weather. I understood. What I would actually say to Andrew is, Andrew, let's think through this. Look, we know that there's a possibility that the weather turns bad. So instead of just making that our one plan, why don't we have a contingency plan? Why don't we come up with a plan where if the weather looks like it might turn bad, we're going to take vehicles and we're going to forward stage at a base that's a little bit closer so we can still execute our mission. So when you have that idea in your head that you can control a lot more and you can take ownership of a lot more than you think, it's going to benefit you in every single way and in every single aspect of your life. Now, there are things in life that you can't control, right? There are some things in life that you cannot control. One of the biggest and scariest of those things is something like a disease, like cancer. You know, that comes into people's life. They don't have control over that. Right now, if no one on this platform right now would have guessed 3 months ago that this entire country would be shut down. So it's easy to look at that and say, well, I can't control that. I can't control this disease. I can't control this virus. So how do we take ownership of things that we truly cannot control? Yes. And the answer is that we take ownership of how we respond. That's what we do. We take ownership of how we respond to these things that unfold in front of our eyes. Now, there's a couple things you want to do, especially from a leadership perspective. Number one, don't get emotional. Don't get emotional. Don't start yelling and screaming. Don't curl up into a ball and cry. What you want to do is you want to detach. You want to take a step back from your emotions. Again, this is from a leadership perspective. Number two, and this is what I've been telling all of our clients, what you need to do is tell the truth about what's happening. Tell the truth. And look, everyone likes to tell the truth when there's good news. When we're making money hands over fist, when we're hiring on more employees, when we're growing our business, everyone wants to tell the truth about that. But when there's bad news, when the income is going down, when we're shrinking our offices, no one likes to talk about that. You have to tell the truth about what's going on. So then the next question I get is, okay, Jocko, that sounds great. I want to tell the truth, but I don't know what the truth is. I don't actually know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to be in lockdown for 3 months or 3 days. I don't know if this disease is going to last for another year. I don't know if there's going to be a second wave. How am I supposed to tell the truth about things I don't know? And the answer is, you actually tell the truth about the things you don't know. Yes. You look at your team and you say, hey, here's the possibilities of things that could happen. I'm not exactly sure which way this is going to go because I can't see the future. But here's some possibilities. It could go this way. It could go that way. And what I'm going to do is we're going to make some plans. We're going to have some contingencies that we can flex and adapt to some of these possibilities that are out there. That's what we're going to do. So it's okay to not know exactly what's going to happen, not have great information, or even having contradicting information. This is what happens as leaders. It happened all the time in the military. We can see it happening right now in the world. So now the next question is, okay, I'm a leader. I don't know what's going to happen. How do I decide where I'm going to go? And so here's what you do. You've got all this different information coming in. Some people are saying this is going to last for a year. Some people are saying it should be over right now. All this different information. First of all, you assess that information. You correlate what information you can, obviously. But then you're going to look at that information and you're going to assess what you think is most likely to happen. And that's a fancy way of me saying that you take a guess. Mm-hmm. You take a guess, and no one wants to hear this. No one wants to hear a leader talking about, hey, the way I'm going to lead is I'm going to take a guess, right? No one wants to hear that. But let me tell you, if you're in a leadership position, you're not going to have perfect information, and you are going to have to take a guess on what is going to happen. But here's how we mitigate the fact that we're taking a guess. We mitigate that by making the smallest decision that we can. So I've guessed that we should go in this direction. I'm going to make the smallest decision. I'm going to take a small step in that direction. And then I'm going to assess what I see, because now I'm in a different position. Things have changed a little bit. My view has changed a little bit. The perspective's changed. Time has passed. And I say, wait, did it seem like this was a good direction to go in? Did it seem like I was right? Oh, it looks like I was right. Good. I'll make another small step in that direction. I do another assessment. Does it look? I'll run that feedback loop. If it looks like I'm moving in the right direction, I'll continue going that way. Now, what you have to make sure is that you maintain the humility that if I say, okay, everyone, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think we should go this way. We make a small step in that direction. Maybe we even make another small step in that direction. I look around and say, wait a second, this doesn't look good. Feedback looks different. Now I'm getting negative feedback. To have the humility to say, hey, everyone, looks like I was wrong about this. We're actually going to retract a little bit, and we're going to start moving in a different direction. So you have to be able to do that. You have to have the humility to do that. But you'll notice in both these cases, whether you're right or whether you're wrong, what you're doing is you're taking action. You're not sitting back and waiting for the world to happen to you. You're going to go out there and make something happen. And we call that at Echelon Front, we call it being default aggressive. That's what we want. We want to make something happen. And look, are there times when you need to take a pause and step back and let things develop a little bit? Absolutely. But a vast majority of the time, taking action is the best thing to do. You know, the Marine Corps just released a new document, and one of the terms that they use in there is they want to train their young Marines to have a bias for action. They are going to do something. Don't sit back and wait for the world to change to where you are. No, when the world is changing, you go on offense, you get ahead of it. And that's really, you know, one of the things that I love about Andrew's story, and he kind of brushed over it. I mean, Andrew got out of the Navy and a great paycheck, and, you know, his family taken care of, all medical stuff covered, place to live, all those things. He got out of the Navy and got into the mortgage industry in 2007. The whole world, the whole mortgage industry is falling apart. The real estate world is falling apart, and that's what he entered into. And what he did, and this is what I say all the time. This is what leadership is for. These challenging times that we're facing right now, this is what we live for as leaders. The easy world, that doesn't make you better. The easy ride, it doesn't make you tougher, and it doesn't get you where you want to be. These times like this, these challenges that we're in right now, these are absolutely opportunities. As long as you go on offense, you step up, and you lead. And with that, I'll stand by for some questions.
No, that's fantastic. Jocko, just to that last point you made, because I can't tell you, Jocko, how many people we've had on this show who started successful businesses in 2007, in 2008, or under some level of duress, right? So what is it about those times that gets somebody to just stand up and deliver? Like, what is it about that?
Well, you have two choices. You only have two choices when things are going hard. You can curl up in a ball, you can go in the corner, and you can accept your fate, or you can stand up, you can get your gear on, and you can go and fight. And those are your choices. That's what you have to do. And what's interesting is, you know, Andrew's talking about Task Unit Bruiser, and the only reason that we talk about Task Unit Bruiser to this day is because we went through hard times together. That's the only reason. I did 7 deployments with 7, different SEAL elements. The one that I talk about is the one that we went in the most brutal combat with, because that's what bonds you together. That's what makes you strong. The only thing you have to watch out for is, look, if you've got an element, if you've got a team, if you've got a family, if you've got a group of people, there's little fractures between people, right? There's little friction between me and Andrew and me and Wasal and Randy. Maybe we got little differences. And when you start to compress us, there's two things that can happen. Either that pressure makes us stronger and makes us tighter, or those little fractures that are there, we allow them to blow us apart and it destroys us. So once again, we make the choice on what we're going to do. Are we going to let these pressures, when I'm feeling pressure about something, am I going to allow myself to lash out at Andrew because I'm going to lose my temper because I'm stressed about something and widen that fracture? Or am I going to hold on to that? Am I going to look to him to support me? Am I going to give him the support that he needs so that we get stronger together as a team? Obviously, the right choice is obvious. Why is it so hard? It's hard because we're human beings. It's hard because we have emotions. It's hard because we all have egos. It's hard because we all have fear. All those things add up, and those are the things that rip us apart.
Well said. Wissal, I'm going to go through, we've got a ton of questions here, but why don't you go ahead and ask Jocko one of your questions?
This is very thought-provoking, Jocko, and I feel super grateful right now that I read this book well before this entire situation, because I got to say, we've been drawing on it as a company from a leadership perspective. In fact, our partner, our CEO, AJ Shaw, went to your muster last year after Matt Emery introduced this book to us, and kind of we were talking about it. And I see so clearly that as a team, this company has gone through and leveraged some of the principles that you have taught us as leaders to get through this coronavirus situation. And we saw this crisis as a complete opportunity to advance this entire industry onto a new normal, right? And so I feel so grateful that we've actually been able to leverage some of these principles, and you're reaffirming them for us today. And, I want to ask you, how can you translate that mental fortitude that you're speaking to us with about times of crisis, right? I actually think sometimes, Jocko, it's easier in times of crisis to make that hard decision to do the right thing. Whereas on the daily, when it's just you and you're in your home quarantined and you're an independent contractor, real estate agent sitting at home, how do you get the individual who's not in a dire situation to want to wake up at 4:30 and put their feet on the ground like both you and Andrew do? I watch your Instagram and I see between approximately 4:31 and 4:33 a.m. there is a photo of your watch and Andrew's on Instagram, followed by a photo a few hours later of sweat on the ground. How do you do that every day when there isn't a dire circumstance? How can you give us some tips as civilians who just aren't as tough about that consistency? Can you share that with us?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things going on with that question, because and this is one of those, when you asked me that, when you were starting to talk about like, hey, how do you get someone every day to do the things that they're supposed to do? Well, I can talk a lot about, hey, when you shoot a weapon, you're looking at a target that's 500 meters away. And physiologically, when you look at that target that's 500 meters away, after a couple seconds, it becomes blurry. It becomes blurry. You can't really see the target anymore. So What you learn to do in the SEAL teams is something called front sight focus. The target's way off there in the background, you know where it is, but you focus on the front sight of your weapon, which is two or 3 feet away from your eye. That's where you look. So what happens in the business world is we got these long-term goals. They're out there. We want to buy another house. We want to do this. We want to do that. Well, after a little while, those things that are 2 or 3 years out, they get a little bit blurry. So what we have to do is we have to bring something closer. We have to set up little shorter goals. Really common, you hear it, set up shorter goals that you just know that you can get done. You'll get some feeling of gratification, because let's face it, when you're trying to buy a house, or you're trying to save money, or you got some big project that you're trying to do, and it's 3 years away, you don't get much gratification because you worked a day or 2 days. It's just not there. So you set up smaller goals that are leading you in the right direction, that give you that short-term gratification. That's the first part of the answer. Now, the second part of the answer, or the second question that you asked is, hey, well, how do you do it? How do you get up at 4:30 every day, and how do you go and get after it? And this is the strange part of it. The answer is, I don't think about it. I don't think about it. I don't negotiate with it. I don't have any conversations in my head. I actually turn my brain off and go do what I'm supposed to do. I go do what I'm supposed to do. Now, look, I know that there's a long-term benefit to it. I understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I understand that health is important. I understand that having a schedule is important. I understand that I want to be at a certain place and I want to be able to maintain a certain standard. I understand all those things. I don't say one of those things when the alarm clock goes off in the morning. When the alarm clock goes off in the morning, I get up out of bed and I go do what I'm supposed to do.
Amen. That's
Amen.
so
Amen.
motivational. So motivational. I need to get my workout in today now. Thanks, Jocko. Appreciate that.
You're a little late.
You're a
I
little
know.
late.
I'm way
Exactly.
behind you. I'm way behind. All of us are behind right now, I have a feeling.
Jocko, Wasal mentioned that my co-founder in this company, AJ, went to your event, and it was really impactful for him. He actually has a question. So this is a pointed question for you, and then let's get Andrew back on for a broader Q&A. So AJ says, with extreme ownership, how do you take extreme ownership for something when you are dependent on others for the mission to be successful? Is there a limit to how you view personal accountability when you are part of a team?
So when you're in charge of a team and you fail the mission, your team fails the mission and you don't accomplish the mission, there's only one person responsible, and that is the person that's in charge. So again, this is a common question. Sometimes I'll get, AJ formed that question very well. Sometimes I'll get the question like this, a similar question, but someone will say, hey, Jocko, I get the whole extreme ownership thing, but what do I do when it's really not my fault?
Right.
Like, what do I do when it's really not my fault? And in their mind, they're thinking, look, if one of my frontline troops does something that they weren't supposed to do, how can that possibly be my fault? So if I'm the task unit commander, and then you got a platoon commander, an assistant platoon commander, a platoon chief, a leading petty officer, a squad leader, a fire team leader, and all the way down there on the front line, you got a new guy that's shooting a machine gun, and he shoots the machine gun in the wrong direction. How can that possibly be my fault all the way at the top? Well, I can tell you exactly how. Who's in charge of making sure that guy's been trained properly? Me. Who's in charge of selecting to make sure that that guy's in the right position? Who's in charge of making sure that that guy understands the importance of what he's doing with his weapon? And who's in charge of making sure that his squad leader and his fire team leader know that he needs to be specifically briefed on his field of fire? All those, there's a dozen other things that I as a leader need to do. And by the way, who's responsible that if I have a guy on the front line carrying a machine gun, that if he's not capable of doing that job, who's responsible for getting rid of that guy? Me. So the minute that I say that happened and it's my fault, I take 9 steps of action to make sure it never happens again. That's what I do. I put a training program in place. I rebrief his fire team leader and his squad leader. I talk to his platoon commander, making sure that these guys are running extra rehearsals. I do all kinds of things to fix that problem. The minute I say, hey, machine gunner shot his machine gun in the wrong direction, not my fault. Who's going to fix it now?
Yeah.
Who's going to fix it now? The machine gunner might not even know what he did wrong. The fire team leader, he obviously doesn't know how to fix it, or it wouldn't happen in the first place. So everything that happens on a team when you're a leader, you are absolutely responsible for it. You are. And when you have that mentality spreads. That mentality absolutely spreads throughout your unit, throughout your team, throughout your organization. And what you'll end up with is everyone looking at, when I say, hey, machine gunner shot in the wrong direction, it's my fault. The platoon commander says, no way, Jocko, that's my fault. He's my machine gunner. And the squad leader says, no, I should have given him a better brief. And the fire team leader says, oh, you know what? I should have actually confirmed that he knew which direction to shoot in. That's my fault. And now we have everyone on the team solving the problem. And that problem will absolutely get solved. And that will become an unstoppable team. As opposed to a team where I say it was the machine gunner's fault, and he says, well, the fire team leader didn't tell me, and the squad leader says, well, the fire team leader says, well, the squad leader didn't tell me, and the platoon commander says, well, you didn't tell us to train the guys. It's all excuses. We never get better. If something goes wrong on your team, it's your fault. No limits.
Well, real talk, Jocko.
Well said.
Absolutely real talk.
You've given that message before. So why don't we bring Andrew back on right now? So Andrew, I'm going to bring you back on the screen. And so we're all here together, all 4 of us. And Wasal, jump in if you have anything. I've got a ton of questions here that have come in. So let's spend a few minutes here on a little bit of Q&A.
Well, as you know, we are so grateful to have both of you on to bring this lesson and this content to all of our viewers. So let's take this time to let them ask the questions that they want to hear from these amazing leaders.
All right. So the first one's a little bit wordy, and Jocko, I know you're a fan of brevity, as am I. So let me try to cut this down a little bit. But this is from John Bubba Cox. He says, first off, thank you for everything you do. You are, in my book, the definition of a true American and true leader. My question is twofold. This probably is going back to your buddy bud days, but is it difficult to resonate the message that almost everything can be accomplished by setting your mind to that goal and putting in the hard work to achieve it? I think too many people do not believe the mindset of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, quote, anymore, and look for excuses and reasons to fail. So that's for both of you, but that's the first question from John Cox.
I mean, it's not really a question. It's more of a statement. I was a little nervous about his first statement. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish it. But he immediately said, if you put your mind to it and you do the work, you can accomplish it.
Yes.
Hey, that there is a strong possibility of that. I can tell you that there's some limitations on that. I would never have been able to play in the NBA, or I would never have been, a great Olympic weightlifter. I don't have great genetics for that. I could have been really, really good. So yeah, there's some limitations to it. But if you set your mind to something and you do the work, that's 99% of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got a couple more here. So one is, how do you apply, so for both of you, how do you apply extreme ownership in a time when you have two distinct teams, each relying heavily on you? For example, your work team, family members, long-term ailments, things like that. So when you have two distinct teams like family and work, how do you apply extreme ownership?
Well, I'll just say that extreme ownership applies no matter what, whether you're talking about your team at home or your team at your business or spoiler alert, book number 2 that Leif and Jocko wrote is called The Dichotomy of Leadership, because all of these lessons, these laws of combat are dichotomies, and you can get too far out of balance in one or the other. And likewise, you can absolutely get too far out of balance with work. If you're spending all of your time at work to the neglect of your family, and you lose your family as a result, your wife or your husband leaves you, your kids, all of a sudden get hanging out with the wrong crowd and things like that. Well, then what's the point? And don't you think that's probably going to erode away your ability to be a good leader and a good contributor to your team at work? Likewise, if you say, hey, my family's the most important thing no matter what, work will always be there, but my family's number one. And you say, hey, sorry, boss, I couldn't show up for the meeting today because, I had to be at home with my family. And if you do that too far the other way, well, then you might lose your job. Then you can't provide for your family. So the point is that those things are interconnected. And either way, the success or failure, as Jocko talked about, extreme ownership applies either way, no matter what. But you got to watch that you don't get out of balance in those areas, or they begin to pull each other apart as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll throw in kind of a fun curveball here. So we have a question which is a jiu-jitsu related question. So what do you see happening to our sport until a vaccine is available? Are you still able to train?
I think that gyms are going to open back up and we'll be back to normal. Look, there's an element of our population that is very vulnerable to this disease, and there's an element of this population that's not that vulnerable. The death rates and even the hospitalization rates for younger, healthier people are very, very low. And so, and yet, for my parents who are 80 plus years old, have compromised immune system, they need to be in quarantine. They cannot train jiu-jitsu right now at the gym. They really shouldn't even go to the gym. As far as my 17-year-old son, my 20-year-old daughter, my 18-year-old daughter that are all healthy, my 10-year-old daughter, we can go out there and train. So I think things will go in the right direction. I think that's what's going to happen to America. We're going to go back with caution. And it's like I said earlier, we don't know what's going to happen, so we're making small steps in that direction.
That's right.
And as we make small steps in that direction, we can make adjustments as we go along. And if we make a step that was too big, we can pull back a little bit. If we see that we're moving in the right direction, we're not getting negative feedback, we can move a little bit faster. So I have a positive outlook. America is a strong place. Jiu-jitsu players are healthy people. We'll be back. We'll be back strong.
Fantastic. I'm sure he'll be excited to hear that. One of the other questions that I have, and there was another question that came in along these lines. Jocko, you in particular talk about not raising your voice, right? But not yelling for the sake of yelling, right? Conveying a sense of urgency at the right time. If you walk around yelling all the time, it's a crying wolf, right? It doesn't mean anything. One of the things that I think about a lot in my own leadership with my team is that everyone's a little bit different, right? So actually the guy, John Cox, who asked that question, we know John, he's on our team. And he's the kind of guy that wants you to walk up to him, get in his face and yell at him, right? And tell him to get his shit together and make stuff happen. And I've got other people on my team who would go into tears immediately if I ever did that. So, the principles are universal, right? But how do you think about the delivery of your messages based on the individual?
Yeah, so in the latest book I wrote, which is called Leadership Strategy and Tactics, I broke it down like this. I said, being a leader is like being a woodworker. So when you're a woodworker, you've got lots of different tools, and you need to know how to work with each of those different types of tools.
Yes.
And then you have lots of different types of wood. So when you have a piece of oak, which is hard as a rock, and you have a piece of pine, which is soft, you need to use your tools a little bit differently with those different types of wood. So as a woodworker, you need to know how to modulate your use of the tools. On top of that, not only is pine different from oak, each individual piece of pine is a little bit different from every other piece of pine. So yes, as a leader, you have to modulate and you have to adapt how you communicate with people to make sure that you're doing it in the most effective way. Now, does this mean every time I talk to my 36-man task unit that I go, okay, Andrew, let me tell you first in this way, and let me tell you, Leif, in another way, and let me tell you, Johnny, in another way, and let me tell you, Fred? No, I have a broad message that I put out that hits most of the people, and then I'm paying attention. And if I see Andrew's got a look on his face that maybe there's something he doesn't agree with, I can either ask him and say, hey, are you good with this plan? Maybe I pull him aside afterwards and say, hey, does this make sense to you? Are you okay with this? So that's what you're going to do as a leader. You have to utilize your tools. You have to utilize them correctly. And one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is they know they need to yell at John Cox to make him motivated, but then they go over to, Fred, and they yell at him and he breaks down. Even this idea of being really, straightforward. Hey, Wasal, if you're making a mistake, I'm going to come at you. I'm going to tell you what your mistake is so you can fix it. That's great. That's great in theory. But if I do that every day and I start to wear down Wasal's confidence, all of a sudden I'm not being a good leader. I'm not helping her. Sometimes I might say, if I notice Wasal does something wrong and I say, hey, why'd you do that? And she explains it to me and I can see that she's a little bit down on herself. Maybe the next day I want to lift her up. So yes, absolutely. Everything we're talking about right now is what makes leadership the hardest thing in the world. You're dealing with a bunch of different people. Every single person is different, and every single person is pretty much crazy, including you.
Everyone will attest
totally
to that,
agree.
Jocko. That's 100%
Jocko,
true.
On that note, I just want to bring this up. We have an internal leadership philosophy that we are leveraging in our daily lives and when we onboard employees, when we talk to our customers. And it is this theory surrounding superpowers, right? Because we built an environment here where every employee can actually focus on whatever their natural sort of God-given talent and intersection of passion and skill is and highlight and elevate that. And when you have a large group of people doing that around one another, we believe it's the best type of way to sort of live, right? So we're doing that. And AJ, our CEO, and I talk frequently about superpower, which accompany to that is a kryptonite for every individual. And so our company, any employee you call on at ListReports knows their superpower and their kryptonite. And so I thought on behalf of our team and all of our listeners out there, I wanted to ask you what you believe your superpower is, because you're good at a lot of stuff and you have a lot of accomplishments. And Andrew, I'm going to ask you the same question, so get ready. I want to know what you think is your unique superpower, Jocko.
I would say one of the things is that I'm not really that super at anything, and I'm aware of that. So I'm not, I was never the fastest guy. I was never the smartest guy. I was never the strongest guy. I was kind of not really great at anything. And the thing that I could do was be aware of that, which meant I had the ability to take a step back, detach, look at what's actually happening, and try and figure out a good solution. And that's really what my life became. As a leader, that's what I do. I take a step back, I look at what's happening, and I pick how we're going to go forward as a team. I thought you were going to ask me about my kryptonite, which I think would have been a little bit more fun. But I thought Andrew might have hit on.
That's the next question.
Well, I thought Andrew might have hit on this because I'm not a person that likes to get bogged down in the details, and a person that likes to, file reports and run numbers. And as Echelon Front, the company, grew, I knew a guy that not only had awesome skills as a leader, combat experience, brave, and on top of all that, one thing that he was really good at was handling those kind of tasks. And so as soon I talked to my business partner, Leif Babin, we were actually lifting weights, and he was telling me, we got to do this and we got to do that. And I know he has an even bigger kryptonite of doing detailed, small oriented things. And I said, let's talk to Andrew Paul. And there you go. It was as soon as those words left my mouth, Leif, wanted to give me a hug, because he knew that was the element that we needed on the team that was gonna make up for our weaknesses, and not only that, bring all kinds of other strengths to the table. So you're right, that is a great way to do things. And every leader is going to have weaknesses. And when you find your weaknesses, you got to have the humility to admit those weaknesses, and then have the humility to say, you know what, I need some help over here. I'm not good at this. Where can I build a complementary team using what people?
I love that. We love the idea of hiring to your areas of weakness so that you become stronger as a unit. Andrew, superpower, kryptonite.
Well, I'm not super tall, not super fast, not overly intelligent. But so I think my superpower is that I just will not quit. I mean, I will wear your ass out. I was told so many times, because of my height and weight and size, and by people who had no idea what it took to become a SEAL, that Andrew Paul could never be a Navy SEAL. I mean, that's just like, so wow. I just won't stop, so I may not have the skills to perform at a NBA level or an Olympic athlete, but I mean, dude, I will just go till you die or I win, so, and now on the other side, I saw that maybe that's it, but on the other side, the kryptonite is, admittedly, I draw a lot of power from my emotion, but that's probably my kryptonite too. I am at my core an emotional person, to be perfectly honest with you, and so that can show up in a negative way if I feel that you are like to attack me or my teammate or somebody who I love. Like if you try to steal from me, my company, my team, or do something that lacks integrity, like lie on a loan application or misrepresent, whiting out a W-2, like that kind of crap in the morning, like that type of thing. Like I can get pretty passionate about that pretty quickly. And so I need to keep that at a appropriate response as opposed to an uncontrolled reaction.
We've had many of those private conversations over the years. We share that similar passion. I understand. I don't see that as your kryptonite. I think everyone has a different perspective. I think right. What I am noticing.
That's my wife. She'd probably be able to answer that question a lot better too.
Yes, I'm sure Brooke could. I was thinking while both of you were speaking, let's be frank. You guys are uber masculine, just super aggressive, default aggressive, Jocko. And our audience is predominantly female real estate agents. And what I want to bring to light here is the notion that what both of you are speaking about, despite the demeanor in which you're speaking about it, is the sense of vulnerability. Both of you are highly vulnerable leaders. And I see that so clearly in that you're both willing to admit your faults, your failures, your weaknesses, and that vulnerability brings everyone closer together. And I just want to thank you both for being so vulnerable and honest in your communication and in all of this education that you're sharing with everyone else. It's an incredible trait. And I want to make sure all the females are picking up on this so that they don't, think that they too cannot be default aggressive. Jocko, can you comment on that? We have a ton of female leaders out here. We had a lot on the show this week that are incredible leaders in their own space, veterans as well. And for those civilian female leaders out there that are watching this, can you relate a leadership principle back to them? And please tie this up for those listeners.
Yeah, I mean, we work with males and females in the military, work with males and females in the civilian sector. And I will sometimes get asked these kind of questions, or I'll get these kind of comments. Yeah, but I'm a female, or yeah, but I'm old, or yeah, but I'm young. because people are in an environment where they're working with someone that, old guy working with young people, young woman working with old guys. It's all over the map. Here's the thing, and this has played itself out over and over and over again. A good leader is a good leader. They have the exact same characteristics. They're humble. They listen. They're decisive when they need to be decisive. They step back. They don't get emotional. All these things, look, it's universal. And generally when someone says, well, that doesn't work for me because I'm young and my staff is older, I'm old, or I'm female. And it's not that. It's you're out of balance at something. Your ego's getting in the way. You're being too emotional about something, or you're not being emotional enough. Andrew talked about being emotional as a negative. If you've ever worked for a leader that doesn't show any emotions at all, they don't connect with anybody.
Yes.
So no one really is part of a team. So where do we want to be? We want to be balanced. And it doesn't matter if you're male, female, old, young, black, white, doesn't matter. Leadership is leadership. And the good leaders have the same traits. They modulate, they're humble, they work hard, they make stuff happen, they listen, they move forward.
Beautifully
Fantastic.
said. Beautifully said. Jocko, I got one last question, and then I'm going to let you go. I appreciate all of the time that you've taken. I feel like we could do this all day long. So the question from the audience is, as a leader, how do you create an environment of collecting honest employee feedback to improve your leadership skills? Because I've seen this time and time again, right? People don't want to say anything. So how do you create that environment?
You have good relationships. And Wasal's kind of commenting and painting me, Wasal painting me to be this big aggressive guy, and I'm yelling at the camera and all this, and I'm 230 pounds, and I got a shaved head, and I have a black eye right now. I'm gonna be the scariest boss ever. I can promise you this: if anyone on my team doesn't agree with what we're doing, has some feedback for me, wants to tell me something, they will all come up and say, hey, Jocko, I don't like the way we're doing this. Hey, Jocko, this plan doesn't seem right. Hey, we should execute this a different way. Hey, I need help. I need support. I can't make this happen. You got to have relationships with the people on your team. If you don't have good relationships, you're not going to be able to communicate. And let me say this. What is leadership? The real actual what is leadership? Leadership is communicating with other human beings. That's what leadership actually is. I'm getting the idea in my head out of words coming out of my mouth that are going to make this team do things. That's what leadership is. And it doesn't only go from me out and down to the team. Leadership includes feedback coming back in my direction, me processing what's happening on the front lines. So you have to build those relationships. That means, what do? You treat people with respect. What do? You want people to tell you what's going on? Listen to them. Ask them questions and actually listen to what they tell you. That's what you do. You build the relationships. You listen to what people have to say. You treat people with respect. You give them trust. If you give people trust, you listen and give them respect. They're going to give you respect. They're going to listen and they're going to trust you. It's a two-way street.
As you said at the beginning, right, Jocko, the principles are simple, and they're simple. And that is one of the laws of combat, right? Is simple. And so I love that about this framework is the simplicity of it. Jocko, thank you so much for your time today. I mean, we're honored to have you here. Thank you for your service and your leadership, and for putting this book out into the world, and for sharing this message, and frankly, for providing a way for people to get access to this easily and affordably online as well. I think that's a tremendous benefit. So thank you so much for everything, Jocko.
Thanks for having me. And to all the folks out there, look, buying homes is the American dream. That's one of the top memories in my life is when I bought my first home. And you all are out there working to make that dream come true for Americans across the country. It's going to be a tough time right now. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm not sure, but I do know this. It's time to step up and lead through it. Thanks for what you all do.
Thank you, Jocko.
Thank you, Jocko.
Thanks for your service, the education, all the support. Thank you very much. We appreciate having you today.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We'll talk to you all later.
Okay. Bye, Jocko.